Okay, 3 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Yes, Scott Holwick.
Here.
Roger Lang.
Here.
Renee Davis.
Here.
And Tom Jester is not here yet. Ken Houston.
Here.
Wes Lowry.
Here.
Kevin Bowden.
Here.
Jason Elkins.
Here.
Chris Huffer.
Here.
Heather McIntyre is here. And Councilmember Martin.
Here.
All right.
Okay. Approval of previous month's minutes. Anybody have any questions or concerns about the minutes from last time?
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Kevin, you doing the water report?
Yeah, I'll get that for you. The flow this morning at Lyons was 327 CFS with a historic average of about 250 CFS for the state. The call out on the St. Vrain is Foothills Reservoir, and that's a 1910 call. Currently, there is no call on the South Platte, so it's pretty rigid down there. Rock Place Reservoir is currently at elevation of 6386, which is approximately 13,289 acre-feet storage. That's down 2,900 acre-feet from full, about 80%. Union Reservoir is at an elevation of 23.8 or 9,900 acre-feet, and that's down approximately 3,500 acre-feet from full. So, as of May 1st, our district reservoirs were 66% of average. 66%.
Just a curiosity question, with all the rain, did that have any negative impact on us at all?
As in damage or as in?
Start with damage.
Localized, just
small
stuff. Yeah, we haven't really experienced a lot of flow right now. I mean, a lot of water into the reservoirs, but we haven't really got much.
Okay. All right, very good. All right, public invited to be heard. Presentation.
Presentation, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Sean Cronin. Is Scott Grieving with the St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservancy District. They're going to give us a presentation on the recently applied for Protocol 566 funding, which is hopefully will bring some money into the basin for water resources projects throughout the basin, help all the water projects in the basin. So let's Sean started.
Thank you, Ken. So as Ken said, my name is Sean Cronin. I'm the Executive Director of St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservancy District, and it's good to be back, particularly in person. It's been a few years since I've been here. One of the last times I was here was talking to you about the possibility of the St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservancy District going on the ballot. We ended up doing that in November of 2020. What led to that discussion of going on the ballot was the completion of a stream management plan, as well as coming out of the flood, and just looking at the future of water development, water supplies, and the needs around the valley with regards to stream restoration and other things that would maximize water supplies. And what we heard from the community is it would be great if there was a source of funding to be able to do all the things that we want to do. And so that led to the St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservancy District saying, hey voters, would you be interested in increasing your property taxes in order to generate revenue to focus on these kinds of water projects? And the kinds of water projects you're about to hear in Scott's presentation on the PO 566. But as I was out with the community asking them to raise their property taxes, I said, I think I can take the dollar that you would give us, and I think I could perhaps get another dollar from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, the state of Colorado, and some other grants. Most of those grants require some kind of match. So in order for us to be competitive with other parts of the state, we need some local source of funding. So I think I could have some return on the investment. Collectively, it's about $3 to $4 million a year that come in through this new property tax. There was a 10-year sunset associated with that, so it'd be 2030. So round numbers, $30 to $40 million that would be available locally to the St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservancy District to work with our partners. This can't, the water projects that we're talking about can't be done without collaboration and can't be done without working together, and certainly can't be done without leveraging each of our dollars together collectively. When I told them I thought I could maybe get a dollar for dollar, what Scott's about to present to you is we made a $240 million ask to the federal government. I, in my wildest dreams, didn't envision that we would take 30 to 40 million and turn it into 240 million, but there is a possibility we could do that. And you're about to hear about the kinds of projects that we're talking about. The reason I didn't envision a 240 million is because we didn't envision a pandemic, and we didn't envision the federal government finding another printing press to print out more money to put out for infrastructure and water-related projects. And that's where this money is. There's about $600 million nationwide, and we asked for just about half of it just to come here locally. That shows you the demand and the nature of what we're trying to accomplish here locally. So I want to thank you for inviting us in to share with you an update on this. There's lots of other things that we're working on with that new tax funding, and would welcome the opportunity to come back and talk to you about other projects that we're working on that I think you'll have interest in. But we're real excited about this opportunity because it really has some great opportunities for Longmont, and Longmont tangentially as the region, and as we think about water development and water sharing opportunities. So Scott?
Thank you. So I'll give some background on the PL 566 program and then jump into some of the specific projects that that Longmont has requested be included in our overall request to the NRCS. So this program was founded in the 40s through the National Resource Conservation Service as Public Law 83-566, or just PL 566. It was created primarily for, it's called the watershed program, so there's a watershed focus to it, but one of the main drivers was flood protection. And so one of the main key components to this are small reservoir constructions for flood prevention. There are several requirements to the program. You need to have a local sponsor, and in the case of our request, we're acting as that local sponsor. There are several authorized uses. I'll show those on the next slide. So it has to fit one of those uses. There's an agricultural or a rural community benefit to it, so it can't be focused. Any area that receives these funds can't be just a city. They want there to be some kind of rural component to it. With the geographic area that we are requesting funds for, we were confident that that box is checked as well. And then as part of the process, you have to develop a watershed plan and also go through either an EA or an EIS permitting process. And that is to give local input, to allow a mechanism for local input to be filtered into the federal permitting process. So any project that's included that receives PL 566 funding has to go through an EA process at a minimum, potentially an EIS. This is a list of the different purposes that any projects that are part of the program can go towards. So you can see there's a wide range of projects. Flood prevention is a key one of those, but there are watershed protections, there's fish and wildlife benefits, there's municipal and industrial water, so a variety of different purposes. There are some limitations, the structure limitations, so there's a volumetric limit. And one of the key reasons for that is at the time of this program creation, if you go back in water management development history, the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation were also developing a bunch of reservoirs. So these limits, these acre-foot limits, really separate this program as focused on smaller dams, so it wouldn't be competing with other federal programs that were building larger dams. This is something to keep in mind. We'll be talking about a potential Union Reservoir expansion, and that 25,000 acre-foot capacity limit could come into play as a consideration into a potential Union Reservoir expansion. This threshold for the environmental impact statement, so most projects go through an EA process, an environmental assessment. If projects are either have a high dollar amount or a high storage amount, they're required to go through an environmental impact statement, which is a more rigorous permitting, federal permitting process. I'm sure many of you are aware of the differences between those two. If not, just raise your hand and ask. At any point, if there's questions, feel free to interrupt me. There are 3 phases to this process, and each of these are funded separately. The first phase is the feasibility phase, or the PIFR, the Project Investigation and Feasibility Report. This is the phase that we are in with our projects right now. Once projects are approved for feasibility and shown that they're a good fit for the program, then they can go into that watershed plan and permitting phase, and then a design and construction phase. The NRCS covers 100% of the costs for phase 1 for this PIFR analysis. They typically will allocate $50,000 for a given feasibility study on a group of projects. Because our geography is, and the number of projects that we have is very large, we actually have gotten a little bit more money than that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. For phase 2, the NRCS again covers all of the costs for that phase, and you come out of that phase with a plan that is more or less a 30% design on most of the projects within your given watershed, and you'll also come out with either, again, that environmental assessment or the environmental impact statement completed. And then you're ready to go into phase 3. The NRCS will cover 100% of design costs, and then for construction costs, it depends on the project purpose, and those different percentages are shown here. One key thing to note, sponsor match and local match aren't required until this construction phase. So the NRCS covers 100% of the costs through design. When you're ready to begin construction, that's when the local match starts kicking in. And for many of these purposes, the NRCS will cover 25% of the match. For municipal and water management, as well as fish and wildlife, the NRCS will cover 50% of the match. And then local, non-federal dollars are required for the other, excuse me, the other portion of that match. As far as timeline goes, that feasibility phase is anywhere between a year to 1.5 years. The watershed and permitting phase can be 2 years. If you need to go through the EIS process, that's likely going to be a longer process. You have, if you guys are familiar with federal permitting processes, the NRCS in this case will be the lead federal entity, and it is in their interest to move that process along as quick as possible. And so you kind of, the NRCS claims that they are able to move through and navigate the permitting process more quickly than might occur otherwise. So that's a potential benefit to the program. There are a lot of folks who hear that and still have questions. So we're certainly curious to see how quickly we can move through, especially in EIS with a water project, with various water projects in Colorado. And then finally, in the design and construction, once funding is approved for that, you have 8 years to spend that funding essentially. If you need an extension, it can be available, but there's an 8-year limit before you need to jump through additional hoops to get that money. This is a figure that shows a little bit more detail, and the main point here is within any given phase, there are times when it's in the local sponsors, there are things that we are working on or consultants are working on, but then there's also good chunks of time that the decision-making or the process is in the hands of the NRCS, where they are working on approving funding, they are working on reviewing results. And so there is just kind of built-in dead time to this process. So staff time, there's certain bursts of staff time that will be required throughout this process, but there will also be large chunks of time that we're just kind of waiting on the NRCS to give us some feedback. And that continues through construction there as well. For the request that we have made, this is the $240 million that Sean was referring to. So there are 37 different projects throughout the watershed, and this is the St. Brandon left-hand watershed, so all the way from Longs Peak out to almost up to Platteville where the St. Vrain joins the Platte River. Soon within our district boundaries. We have a number of partners, the city being one of the key ones. So we're also working with Boulder County Watershed Center, Left Hand Water District, and then some of just companies throughout the basin. Parks and Wildlife also has a project on the St. Vrain State Park. And then we have covered almost all of the different purposes, projects that represent at least one of all the different purposes in the watershed program, with the bulk of those being ag infrastructure. And then we have some question on exactly how the NRCS plans to characterize some of our projects, if they're municipal and industrial or ag water. It shows geographically, again, that red line is the St. Vrain Left Hand Water Conservancy district boundaries. So again, Long's Peak up here, Continental Divide, and then out to the Platte River on the east, so well beyond I-25. These different groupings are an effort to, of those 37 different projects, to split them up in a way that we can evaluate them in smaller chunks to get us under that EA threshold, that $25 million threshold, to expedite the permitting process. Excuse me. To make sure that we can, instead of needing an environmental impact statement on a larger group of projects, the NRCS is allowing us to break them into smaller groups that can go through a less stringent environmental assessment or a less complicated environmental assessment permitting process. Most of the City of Longmont's projects are in this group 4. I'll show you a map in a bit. Sorry, I'll show you a map in just a bit that shows Longmont specific projects. This is a general breakdown between the different purposes and how that funding is distributed. Again, there's a little bit of question. There might be some of these projects that can be classified as flood prevention projects, which receive a higher match ratio from the NRCS, but we're not 100% sure about that yet. Excuse me. So for our projects, as you saw, we've got these broken into 5 different groups. Group 1 is a little bit further in the process than groups 2 through 5. Group 1 is, the PINFR is expected to be completed kind of any day now, so we'll get the feasibility report back from the consultant that the NRCS has hired to do that work. Groups 2 through 5, we just recently heard that they've been approved for funding for that feasibility phase. So a total of $200,000 in feasibility study funding has been allocated for all of our projects. So, you know, at a minimum, if none of these projects are approved for future funding, we got $200,000 from the NRCS to do a high-level feasibility analysis. But we're really hopeful and excited about moving these projects through the process, and we're pretty confident that many of them will be funded all the way through at least design, and then we'll see what funding is available from the NRCS to allocate towards construction at that time. This is that map that shows the Longmont projects scattered throughout mostly the Longmont area, with a few kind of up in the Lines area as well. And I'll go through these each individually at a pretty high level. Feel free to stop me if you have questions. So for the line diversion structure, this would involve a combination of a fish passage, so replacing the existing diversion structure with a more fish passage friendly, doing some stream restoration in the local area, and is expected to cost around $10 million with the matches shown there. So that was on the North St. Vrain. Moving down to the South St. Vrain, this is the Gap Reach restoration area. So if you imagine just west of the town of Lyons, there's a section of creek there that didn't receive a lot of attention after the 2013 flood. And so there's some reach-wide restoration that needs to happen, as well as some Longmont infrastructure that we would potentially consider doing a fish passage replacement on as well, or redesign on as well. The Beckwith diversion structure, so right down by Golden Ponds, another diversion dam across the river that would be either retrofitted or Excuse me. I've got something in my throat. Retrofitted or replaced for fish passage benefit. Thanks, Gary. And then
Charge you for that water.
Yeah, exactly. I'll drop my my quarters in the back. For the Resilient St. Vrain project, I'm sure you guys know this project better than I do, but there's a portion of the project that begins at, is it Boston Avenue, I believe? And then upstream from there to Airport Road that didn't receive FEMA funding or wasn't able to be completed within the current phases of the Resilient St. Vrain. And so the city asked to include this project as one of the possible PO 566 projects, and this one might have, it does have a pretty strong flood conveyance component to it. So with that, there's some consideration that this might fit into the flood prevention or flood mitigation cost sharing benefit. So it would potentially have a higher NRCS match on this project. The bonus ditch diversion replacement, this is right by the new Costco. The bonus ditch diversion from the left-hand creek is a fish passage barrier, and there's also a number of ways that either removing or reconfiguring that diversion could have benefits on the creek and also could tie into some other plans that the city has in that area, I believe. This is one of the larger projects that was included, the Union Reservoir Pumpback Pipeline. This, you guys probably are familiar, I'm sure, involves pumping and building a pipeline from Union up to McIntosh and in connecting with several of the ditches in the area, and allows for greater water delivery efficiency throughout the system. And then the Union Reservoir expansion. As I mentioned, is it the 86 or 88 Union Reservoir expansion study identified, I think, 20.5, elevation of 20.5 feet as the largest potential expansion, which would be associated with 32,000, give or take, acre feet of storage. So if this project is to be included in the PL 566 request, we would need to have conversations with the city and staff about going with a lower expansion. I think the 15-foot expansion was just below that 25,000 acre foot total reservoir cap, and so that could be a potential avenue to pursue. I think there's, go ahead.
But the expansion per se, what construction work is specifically done to accommodate that? I don't know if we'll go into a lot of detail, but what's involved construction-wise to hold that on?
In raising the dam?
Yeah.
Ken, or I'll defer to your staff to answer.
So the primary part of that would be construction of a dam on the south side of the reservoir. There's actually a small dam there now, and it would be raising that dam on the southwest side of the reservoir. It would be replacing the outlet works because they're 120 years old now, and so they need replaced anyway. And then the inlet channel, we would have to put basically a box culvert all the way from the reservoir up to County Line Road 1, so that the greater head would be contained in a pressurized conduit. Most of the property we already own. There's like one or two parcels we still need to acquire. For the most part, we acquired a lot of the property already. So it's really primarily a dam on the south side and then the pipeline for the inlet ditch.
And the PL 566 program does have like a recreation component to it as well, so it could potentially cover not only a portion of the actual expansion costs, but if there's recreational features and other things to be included, there's potential to include that in the overall request as well. So yeah, those are all of the requests. This is a estimate of what the various costs and match might be. These costs are, so the union pumpback as well as union expansion, I have shown as kind of conservatively to fall into this category. If there's more than 50% ag supply involved with those, we could potentially consider them as ag water supply projects, which get a 75% match from the NRCS rather than a 50% match. And also the Resilient St. Vrain might be able to qualify as a flood prevention project, which would also get a higher NRCS match potentially. So this is a lower end estimate of what the NRCS would cover. And I'm going to hand it back to Sean. That's the kind of overview of the projects, and Sean will talk through just a few last bits to think through.
Thank you, Scott. So as I mentioned earlier, when talking to the community about the possibility of taking the $3 to $4 million annually, 30 to 40 over 10 years, and match that, didn't expect the federal government to have a program influx of dollars like they did with PL 566 to the tune of $500 to $600 million. You might have heard on the national scene, they're talking about this being a, quote, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, funding opportunity, again, with infrastructure and the different things that are being put out there. And why not here? Why not the St. Vrain? So that really led to us conversing with the NRCS. And the NRCS said when we first met with them and talked to them about the different projects that we have, the local funding match that we have with the tax increase that the voters approved, they said, we've been around the state looking for a partner, the term they use to do business with. We've been looking for a partner to be able to, a sponsor rather, to be able to work with the PL 566 program, and you just presented it. So we have a very strong, compelling case here locally that we have a need for these kinds of things, and we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take advantage of those dollars. So that really fast-tracks some of what we were talking about implementing over the next decade plus. You overlay that on top of aridification, and you've got the established communities in Northeast Colorado. You've got Longmont, Greeley, Boulder, Fort Collins, and Loveland. And aside from Greeley, those communities aren't growing at the pace and scale that they used to have grown at. So your boards, the city councils, you're all looking out 10, 20, 30, 50 years ahead of time, looking at what that next growth increment could be and where that water supply would come from. I would contend that that chapter, so long as growth restrictions continue to be, or communities have been satisfied with their growth potential, that we're going to have infill, and we need to start looking at drought protection, aridification, and maximizing more water out of the system. So if you look at a map of St. Vrain Creek and you had to map out how to be efficient with water, you would more likely say, I'm going to put a reservoir high in the system, and I'm going to put a reservoir down low on the system. Well, that happens to be Button Rock, and it happens to be Union. And then you'd likely say, and I would take the low quality, untreatable Union reservoir water, and I would pump it back to the ditches, and I would take that ditch water and move it up to my water treatment plant. Well, that's the plan that back in the Milt Nelson days and generations after that, they said, hey, why don't we maximize? We're in that era now. We're in how do we maximize the water, and we deal with aridification, which is not something they were necessarily dealing with. The last piece is quality of life. The PL 566 program, they have examples nationwide where they built campgrounds and parks along reservoirs and waterways. They want to fund these kinds of projects. We all know the stories, and you were probably out there at Union Reservoir during COVID, one in and one out. When you look at the quality of life in this area, whether you're looking at affordable housing and where's that water going to come from, when you look at the recreational opportunities, this program fits really nicely into it. So what we're desirous of is we need to really start having that next chapter of conversations in the Valley about what do we want for the next generation. And these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, if they stay true to being once in a lifetime, aren't going to come around necessarily again. As Scott highlighted, there are years in the making to get the money to the big dollars. The $240 million, that's the construction money. But if we came to you and said, hey, we've got this great opportunity to have the federal government pay all the way through design 100%, we'd all jump at it. But these projects are going to take some time in terms of collaboration. What do we want? What size do we want? How do we want it to work out? How do we engage with the public? What sort of features do we like? We need to start having those conversations now. So we were excited when Wes called us and said, hey, would you come in and talk to us about PL 566? We were equally excited about the opportunity to come share with you, again, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Secondly, encourage you to continue to inquire as to what other projects we have. We'd love to come back and talk to you about those. And then lastly, we're looking for some type of spark out of this board or the Parks and Recreation Board or ultimately City Council on, can we sit down with staff and a community and start working out these details to really look at what sort of opportunities do we want to try to take advantage of and be ready for that next generational project. So happy to, we have time for questions.
One real quick question, you mentioned, we have 6 different categories of projects. Have you got any sense from NRCS whether if they were to approve something at one of those 6, or we had one that's available, does that kind of less likely to get the others, or is it pretty much 100% independent? You can get them all, or you can get none of them?
So what they're doing with the PIFR, they do cost benefit analysis and they do some other things. They might say, for example, one of the projects we have is forest pre-wildfire mitigation. And they said, maybe not. Maybe, well, maybe not. So they're going back and forth internally on whether that's the case. They might say in the PIFR stage, nope, that doesn't get funded. But the rest of it continues to move on. So there may be one where they say, hey, it gets funded, but we believe it's in this particular category, and that is the 50% match. Locally, we might say, we can't afford that, at which point we take that out. What, again, separates us, I think, from the rest of the nation is we have this local source of funding. And you can do the math on 240 million. Not sure we could do that at a 50% match, but when you start getting up to 75 or 100%, the numbers start to shake out. Yes, sir.
So first of all, my apologies for coming late. I some weird traffic out there. So anyway, I had a question about the EA and the EIS process. So there was a mention a couple of times about like that being the designation between those two being more of a kind of a cost threshold or something. And I guess I thought that the designation between those would be more like determination of impact, right? So can you comment on that and whether the timeline that's being kind of presented for the EA and the permitting process in general is perhaps a little generous? I mean, I'm kind of skewed towards larger projects, I would say, so, but certainly it can take years and years to get through that.
Certainly, the main difference from what I understand in the programmatic approach to the EA versus the EIS, if projects are over $25 million or over that volumetric threshold for storage, they require actually approval from congressional committees, I believe Senate and House Ag committees. And so as input, as like stakeholder public input, they use the EIS process for public input for the congressional committee approval.
So a detail on that I think you might be asking is, for lack of a better term, if there's programmatic approval for PL 566 to go under an EA, except at a certain dollar amount and a certain volume amount, you have to get that congressional approval. The committees have said our way to deal with that, instead of having a bunch of hearings and having people go out, go the EIS route, and then we'll do that input. If you stay under that threshold, it's already sort of pre-approved that the NRCS has the federal authorization to do these projects under an EA.
Unless there's identification of impact.
I think if there was some significant impact that was identified in that process, it would kick it into a potential more extensive.
Thank you for this.
I can see where Union is impacted. You mentioned Button Rock. That's not part of this picture.
Correct.
The other thing, taxpayer property tax increase. How wide of taxpayer base did you go out to? Does that include property tax increases beyond the city of Longmont?
Correct.
All of your area?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so as Scott pointed out on that map with the line around it, so Continental Divide, all the way east of I-25 to the confluence of the South Platte. So Longmont being the largest population in that whole area, but certainly, between here and Lyons, as an example, county properties, they pay a property tax to St. Mary Left Hand Water Conservancy District. Pre-vote, it was 0.156 mils, and we asked the voters if they would increase that to add 1.25 to the mill, and they approved that to about 70% voted yes.
And what year was that?
November of 2020.
Your time, probably pretty good on
Well, it was a
that.
little
Today might
freaky
be
at
a
the
little
time.
up the road, but,
The world was coming to an end in 2020, I think.
any other questions?
I do have one. Sean, I was thinking on that union project, the pump back project. If you were to expand that project to include agriculture, so you'd have to have some of the storage and carrying capacity for going out east. What happens if you did that and then that declined in use over time? Do we have any idea how long that would have to hold like that?
So if, say, for example,
The matching.
MCS said, hey, this qualifies under ag,
Right.
so they actually do have some requirements around, hey, if you're gonna accept this money under these conditions, we need some assurances that you're not gonna bait and switch that later. So we would have to, I think, demonstrate that that's in place. I think with, even in Weld County, there's conservation easements for agriculture, but certainly in this area, I think we can prove up that ag is gonna be around a while through the conservation easements.
Anything else? Thanks.
Thanks so much for the time, appreciate the opportunity. Good to see everyone again.
Okay, any agenda revisions or submissions? Unless you have a lot of development activity? Tell me about it. Okay, I guess none there. In general business? Nothing. Okay, items from the staff. Jason?
Got two things I wanted to talk to you about. If you recall, we've got the South St. Brain pipeline pump station that we've installed. We're still working with the pump station manufacturers, Smith and Nobles, to address the vibration issues. We did some more vibration analysis and testing last Monday. We got that report, and we're still looking at the pumps themselves. Physically and mechanically are fine. There's a hydraulic condition within the discharge pipe that's causing some reverberations, and we're seeing some real high vibrations to the extent that if we ran it for a period of time, 2-3 weeks, that the welds and stuff would start failing. So anyway, we're looking at doing some additional bracing and stuff like that. So meeting with the pump station manufacturer, we do have their vice presidents involved in this, and so have reassured us that they're committed to making the pump station work. So unfortunately, we're not able to use it right now, but hopefully here in maybe the next 6 months, we'll have that online. Other than that, the project is complete, other than the sense that we just can't use the pumps.
Right. Time will take care of that, will it?
And then the other thing I was going to give you a quick update on is I'm working with one of our on-call contractors, Excavating, to give me a proposal to do the up at Button Rock Dam on the south abutment. There's been some heavy erosion over time. That's the corner of the reservoir, the dam, that gets hit really hard with debris and logs and wind. And just over time, it's just kind of chiseled away at the embankment. And so we're looking to import some riprap and to reinforce that. That's something that the state inspector has been calling out on for the past couple of years. And so we're finally moving forward with the contractor. We got funding and everything in place to do that. I'm just waiting on them to get me the cost proposal for that. We'll initiate a contract and we'll get them mobilized. Hopefully take advantage of Button Rock Reservoir being low, right? It's not low, but lower right now, and that washed out area is now exposed and we've got good access to it. So hopefully in the next month we can firm that up.
So
Does that look at you like calling on me, or?
Oh, no, I saw your hand there. I thought maybe you had a question.
I do. You said that you have funding ready, and yet you're getting a proposal, so a lot of the city's other engineering proposals have come in over expected funding. Are you likely to be in that situation as well?
Hopefully not. I think I put in a pretty conservative budget request for that, and if it ends up coming in more than I budgeted, I can reprioritize a couple projects, maybe push some things off to next year or later in the season. But we'll
In
have,
favor of this one?
yes. This is a priority.
This might be a dated question, but speaking of debris and button rock, after the 2013, there was a considerable amount of debris that stacked up in Button Rock, is there not?
Yes.
Is that gone or just is it still around?
I think the majority of it's now gone. Ken might be able to speak to it better than I can, but I do recall that there was literally logs that they would float across the reservoir to bring over the spillway to then remove. That has gone down over time, but there's always 3 or 4 logs, being pushed up against the dam at any given time.
Yeah, we had, as part of the recovery efforts, there were 2 major quote debris things. One was the logs, one was the woody debris, and then the other was granular debris, or sand and gravel and rocks. The woody debris, we actually contracted with FEMA money. We pulled over 300,000 cubic yards of woody debris out of the reservoir in the construction. Some of it was taken off, a lot of it was put in a storage area in the borrow area, so it's actually out and away from the reservoir. Some of that's subsequently been cut out for firewood and hauled off. It's still most of it back there, so a lot of material. The smaller stuff was kind of cut up and was in some of the bar area where it's almost barren. So that will actually, I think, for long-term help. Some of the other material at some point, when we get sufficient forestry capacity, we'll probably burn some of the piles. Just as normal forestry work. We haven't done any burning yet. That's kind of long term. We'll look at that. Granular debris is still in the inlet. We're monitoring that pretty closely. The environmental impacts of moving it out are almost more than the benefit of moving it out. So it wasn't a lot of, we can take a lot of capacity from the reservoir, so it's not, that part isn't a matter of concern. At some point, we probably will going to at least move some of it. We quite honestly want to wait until after the Windy Gap Funding project is completed, because to remove that granular debris, we've got to drain the reservoir, and we don't drain the water supply. So once Chimney Hollow is done, full, we have 8,000 acre feet of capacity up there, and you're feeling much better about the drain the reservoir and remove that granular debris. So it'll be interesting. It's a future project for Jason.
Yeah.
Give him something to do over the years in the future.
Anything else, Jason?
Yeah, I had a question for Jason. Where is the source of the riprap material that you're getting in for? I mean, what kind of a distance do you have to convey a lot of heavy stuff up the hill?
Yeah, I think excavating works with Colorado Materials. They'll get it directly from the quarry, and they'll truck it straight from the quarry onto location.
Is that northeast or northwest of Longmont, that quarry that they use?
I'm not even sure which quarry they use. It depends on which rock we want. And I've asked them to try to match the existing rock that's there, which is kind of like that pink granite type rock. Is that what it's called?
That's the spec from the range for granite. That's what the state usually uses. The granite.
But we'll also look at, if there's substantial cost of going a different material, but the chances, the goal is to try to find a riprap that matches the existing, so when we blend it in, it looks natural. Thanks.
Is that it, Jason?
That's it. Thank you.
You're looking for both
So, unfortunately, Hope came down sick today, so we're gonna have to, I guess, postpone most of the conversation. I thought I would just give you a real quick update on our water efficiency master planning effort. As you may recall, we're planning on, or we need to, by state law, update our water efficiency master plan. We put that RFP out, it's been open. The consultant has been selected to do that work. And it's actually Water DM, which is one of the, I guess it's probably the preeminent water efficiency master planning firm in the state. In fact, their principal helped write the CWCD guideline on water conservation master planning. So actually, so we're pretty confident that we can really get firm to start that process. And we'll be starting that process this summer, so we're kind of excited about launching that. We'll come back in June and give you just a little more update on the scheduling, and there'll be a number of times where water board will weigh in and also participate in some of the processes as we go forward and updating that. So that's kind of exciting to actually have that project ready to go, ready to start. So we'll be working on that. Then I'll just defer the rest of the update to Hope next month. We'll kind of update that and go from there.
All right. Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I would have asked to Hope, but I'm impatient apparently. So on the figure, that says per residential per capita use, is that water that like goes to, let's see, how do I ask this? So let's say that you have like an industrial or like somebody that's not using necessarily, like, it's not water from the sink, but some kind of industrial use or something. But if it's treated water, does that get designated as residential use? So in other words, like, any water that's treated and is delivered through a pipe to the city is residential use no matter what organization it goes to.
Well, actually, it's kind of an interesting, for me, it's always been kind of an interesting subject in water conservation. There's really when people talk about per capita use, there's really two ways they calculate it. One is called what I call gross per capita, gross daily per capita, and that's basically your treated water number that the water you treat, send out of your water treatment plant to the system. That's gross. That's a little bit higher number. And then the other is individual, like a single family. So we have meter records, and so we can look at it both from just the single family, just the multifamily, just the commercial, just the institutional, governmental, and system law. So all of that we can look at. The easy number, of course, is gross.
Yeah, what winds up in like the figure that was in the report that was in the packet?
That was intended to be the second number was intended to be the single family residential.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the data that came into that had an error in it, so we gotta calculate that. Use the pivot table to bring the data from the meter records into the spreadsheet, and that pivot table had an error in it. So next month, hopefully, we'll have you the actual correct numbers.
Yeah, I was thinking the one that's like
It's
top right of the first page. I guess it's page, I don't know if it's page number.
like
Like, this says gallons per capita per day, right? Is that,
yeah.
and it's average, it says average residential use next to it, but I'm just always curious about when you do that, whether you take that from the meters or whether you just take that like water leaving the treatment plant divided by population.
Yeah, that's the gross gallons
That's
per
gross.
capita. So that's
Okay.
full treated water divided by 100,000 population. If you look at the, 2022 is just about 138 gallons per capita a day. Our actual, if we're looking at just the single family gallons per capita use, it's in the 90 to 95 gallons per capita a day. So
Yeah.
that's why I've always struggled a little bit with gross. You have to think, you have to think of the system. There are some systems that have, one reason, we were at in 2002, we're at 200, way more than we are now. That was partially because we had Longmont Foods open and operating, and they used a ton of water.
Yeah.
And so that drives your per capita, your gross per capita.
Yeah.
So
So then the reason that I ask is because I'm trying to describe this to students all the time, right? Like, so it's not just like literally when they turn on the water, whatever comes out of the faucet or whatever comes out of the shower or whatever they put on their yard or something, they're always responsible for like some additional fractional amount of water for the t-shirt that got made or for the food that got washed or whatever, or the drink that they got at the restaurant, right? And so there's like this broader concept of kind of like water footprint, and this is like almost like a community water footprint essentially, right?
it is, yeah. So this is a gross.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you.
Yeah, so that's, the per capita is a really squishy concept because in here you've got several national level now breweries, which use a ton of water, but that's in this gross number, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's also, they have a bunch of employees that come into the city that are not in the per capita number, but while they're here during the day, they drink water and flush toilets and even take showers because they biked in, and so it's a very squishy number, I guess, is the point I'm trying to get across.
But what's kind of amazing about these data is that even in light of all that stuff, right, that the numbers are coming down, right, pretty significantly.
Yes.
And so even in light of all of the things that are happening, right, that like, I would imagine that if you just did residential, like just residential water meters or something, that it may even show greater degrees of savings or something because of that potential increase in residential use, although it sounds like maybe there was one particular user in the past that was quite significant, right? You said Longmont.
Yeah. As far as the Longmont, Fort Collins is Anheuser-Busch. I wouldn't want that in my per capita calculation.
No, when I was doing conservation in Fort Collins, I was adamant about trying to talk about residential gallons per capita per day because I wanted Anheuser-Busch specifically out of that. Because it was a flat number, they were never gonna change.
Right.
And actually they were pretty efficient on their water to beer ratio. But, yeah. And I would suspect, not to speak for Hope, but from a conservation specialist perspective, sometimes if your programs are also targeting residential, you really want to say, hey, this is what we're aiming for and this is what we're changing versus whatever else is going on in the community commercial-wise. So that's one reason to go residential. But even that number still has the squish in it because if you have a community with a certain population and this is the residential and everybody leaves town during the day and goes and works somewhere else, that messes with your number. So I always say, don't do too much comparing city to city, because some cities bring people in to work, and some cities export people to work, and stuff like that. And this is
Right. It'd be hard to say which was which.
Pardon?
I said it'd be hard to say which was which for Longmont, because we have a lot of people coming in and a lot of people going
Scott?
Yeah, so there's an interesting question there, and that was great to hear how you look at that. That compares city to city, right, on a given time step. But if you go back in time, when did we begin to have really good residential meter numbers? Because I don't think it was 02,
Yeah,
right?
I'm gonna
So at some point
say
it got better.
05 or 06 is when we went to, about 3 years it took us to universal
Yeah.
meter. We had some flat rates.
Okay.
In 02 we got some flat rates.
Yeah, I was just thinking that there's a time in which the actual year-to-year comparator makes more sense than going back further in time when you get back into the time when that just wasn't
I
available information.
agree with you, yeah, once we became fully metered, 2007 I think that was, I can't remember exactly. But yeah, probably good to start looking at it from about like seven or 8 on.
Why do we have a spike in 2012?
2012 was the drought year.
Dry.
Ah,
You put a lot of water on the lawns.
And honestly, 2002 was the drought year, so,
Yeah.
and 06 and 7 was the drought year. So if you look at that graph, you can also pick out the drought years.
yeah.
And a lot of it's what happens in spring. You know, we had kind of a dry spring, but we had a cool spring that helped us keep our numbers down a little bit this year. But yeah, if you have a really, really quick, warm, hot spring, you just start putting water out earlier in the year. 2002, we really put a lot of water out that spring.
2020 wasn't quite a drought year either, but it was also a big, let's call it water sales year. At least Zimmer Water, we had a lot of water through the system in that too, so you can see that one too. It's not quite a
Everybody
drought.
went and worked at home.
Everybody worked at home, which was, that was kind of I don't remember if that was a huge deal or not. It wasn't super clear. That was a big
That's
effect
kind of how it is.
in that city. But there was a lot of movies that year. And it was a busy September. There was a lot of water in September too. September became our first summer month, our first new summer.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, let me bring up a quick, makes it pretty easy for me that Northern does a monthly report, so I'm just gonna cheat and show you their report, construction update. Let me see. There we go. So this is a picture today of the reservoir construction. And the only thing I wanted to point out in here is at this point, if you look at these pictures, you can actually see the outline of the dam itself as it's coming up. You can see the hydraulic asphalt core going in. And there's a containment gravel on each side of it. So that's really your core of your dam. And then this is the fill of the dam. So the pictures now are, I think they're kind of nice because you can really see what's going on. This is just a kind of a site, the plan and profile of the dam. We're at this point, this is how high the dam is right now. So I think around 70 feet at this point. And so obviously it's much wider at the bottom, but as it goes up, it gets narrower, but it gets wider side to side. So the blue line here is the original ground line. And so we're just, if you go out there, it's hard to tell there's a dam there, even though it's 75 foot tall, because it's basically just, on the downstream side, it's a little higher than the original ground line. On the upstream side, it's right at about the ground. We pretty much meet the ground here, so the pictures don't look like a dam yet, but not to worry, there is one there, and it's starting up, and that was the end of March progress. This is where the project is. These numbers are the construction contract, so the total project's a little over 600 million, but the construction contract, the original construction contract was bid out at 485, and then 43 million in change orders. A little over half of that was the federal lawsuit, 22.5 million for that. So the revised construction contract is at 528 million. The red line indicates what they've earned to date. This orange line is kind of the lowest. At the start of the construction, you kind of project what work you'll do and what you'll do. The orange line, if you go below that, you're really behind schedule. The blue line is kind of the but we expect it's the fastest construction. Right now, we're about 38%. Using dollars as your measurement, about 38% complete. The good news, kind of good and bad news, we have to come up with some money real quick. They're going to spend money. The contractors decided to increase their schedule. They're going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so they're really pumping out some work now. This red line is, they've actually been doing pretty good to date, but they're in the middle of it. But they've indicated, because they've gone to a 24-hour schedule, they're going to start getting a little bit higher. I actually hope to get the project done about 4 to 6 months earlier than projected. So that's good. The sooner they can get it done, that's always better. So that's where we are with the actual construction contract itself.
Is the, maybe I'll get to that, but is the compensation to the contractor going to be problematic with them increasing the schedule as far as what they need to be paid?
They, no, it won't increase the contractors, what contractors paid, so that won't cost the project any. The little bit of additional, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, a few $1 million of additional cost, because the design engineer and the construction management now has to go on 24/7. And that becomes a little more expensive. But I think that's well offset by the value of having that project. I mean, you spend a lot of money, you might as well get the project done and get it. So, but the contractor won't. Really, I think it'll, for them, I suspect it's just the quicker they can get it done, they can save money on having the project going. So.
And so, this is for construction of the dam. Remind me again when they are anticipating beginning to fill. That's not till 26 originally or something?
It would have been 26, yeah, because originally they were looking at late 25 to be done. Of course, when we can't pump, we would have probably put some water in it. Fall of 25, winter of 26. Probably not if we had any CVT water in Granby. When you got water, Granby would move some of that over. Also, some of the part of the project, we have pre-positioned CVT water in there. So we'll probably bring some pre-positioned water over. Would have thought. But basically, it would have been spring of 26 that we would have pumped Windy Gap and tried to put it in there. Probably not going to get the pumping, the 20, 25, if we pump that year, probably won't be able to pump. I doubt they'll have it done early enough, late 24, early 25, but it's possible,
So other than, I mean, I guess I expected that maybe that was the reason to kind of like move up the timeline, but what's the rationale?
I think I suspect their rationale is just
Get it done?
Get it done quicker.
Okay.
They just hit, I think they just hit 1 million man hours of work. So you get a couple thousand people out there working, you want to get it done. Labor's always expensive. So I suspect they being able to get it done quicker. See them. And this is just kind of a summary of the change orders of there were $48 million in budgeted contingency. So far, I had 44 change orders. One thing we wanted to highlight, one change order that just came in was on the left abutment or the west side of the reservoir. There was as you go up so steep, there was a rock slide, and that rock slide was on, for it to clear it out for the dam. So had to do a lot of abutment work, to rock drilling and rock bolting to stabilize the hillside and keep the project going. So, number of, this is currently the, where they are right now. We've just started on the upstream, so they've got they're doing the tunnel, outlet tunnel comes from both sides. They've done the downstream to the gate chamber in the middle, and now they've started on the upstream side and they're coming in. Fortunately, then the rain hit and the outlet tunnel slopes down, so when they're working on the bottom part, they didn't have to worry about any moisture. When you're working on the top one, it slopes down, so all this rain went in their tunnel and kind of messed up their tunnel. Made it muddy, but and then you can see some different different schedules of conduits and other main dam where they expect to be. So that's it. So anyway, going well. Whoops. So that's where the project is right now. We hope to have a little more information next month when we do cash in lieu. I think we'll give you a summary of all the change orders, because I think at some point we need to start talking about how the project costs might weigh in on the cash in lieu calculation, because we're using Windy Gap Energy project as one portion of our cash in lieu calculation. And so we'll want to look at that next month when we do our cash in lieu evaluation for June. And then decide, do we want to, I guess I would propose we may want to look at it either in June or in September of adjusting that number based upon the project costs.
So the question, Ken, on the pipeline of cash in lieu proposals coming in, is it steady, relatively slow? I mean, where are we at with requests for people needing or requiring?
Well, we just got one in yesterday. But other than that, I don't know, Wes, you probably have a better feel for that.
There's a number of developments that are positioned that they can satisfy at any time, but there's some other factors that they're having to weigh in as part of the project. I believe some of those projects will probably be bringing in a combination of non-historic and cash in lieu. Some people that know they have projects that they're going to have coming soon, they've done a little bit of diligence in trying to acquire some non-historic. So I think what there's going to be is a slight lull as some of the few little pieces of non-historic are available, and then we're going to follow that up with probably mainly cash in lieu. So
It's trying to figure out that lull gives us another 90 days to wait till September, whether we need to push it. That was kind of where I was going.
yeah, these people, they could come in with a check tomorrow,
Understand.
but I think they're probably, from the last conversations I had, it was summer or early fall when they were planning to move forward. But that was all I can say.
Okay.
And that's all I got. Just, we gotta break here pretty quick for the interviews, but I just wanted to remind the board that next month, Juneteenth is the third Monday, so our actual meeting will be the next Monday, the fourth Monday, 26th, as well as the tour of the Chimney Hall site. So we'll send out information for those of you who are going on that tour in the morning, and then get that to you. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other items? Board? Marcia,
No,
anything for us from you?
No, I thought the Windy Gap sounded scarier the first time. Ken kind of smoothed out the rough spots in terms of, cost increases and stuff like that, so I'm good.
Anybody else in the room? So we've got something going at 4:20, is that correct? So, all right. If there's nothing else, I'll enjoy the meeting. Thank you.